Kirti Manavasthi, Senior Policy Advisor, Climate Change, GIZ, India. Warm welcome to you. I also have the privilege of inviting our eminent panelists. I invite Shri Ashish Tiwari, Secretary EF and CC, Government of Uttar Pradesh. Warm welcome to you, sir. I invite Dr. Ranjan Panda, Chair CCC Network. A very warm welcome, sir. I invite Dr. Ritesh Kumar, Director WISA. Warm welcome to you, sir. I invite Dr. Madhav Pai, CEO World Resources Institute, India. Warm welcome, sir. I invite Shri Manu Gupta, co-founder Seeds India, Seeds Asia Pacific. Very warm welcome, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, the topic for the session is Governance and Finance, Localizing Resilience, Union 1. And the time duration for the session is approximately 1 hour 20 minutes. And before I hand over to the chair, a few words of introduction. Our session chair, Shri Manoj Kumar Singh, IAS, Uttar Pradesh, 1988. Presently is the Additional Chief Secretary to Government of Uttar Pradesh, Rural Development and Panchayati Raj Department, and ACS. Sorry, this was on his profile. Ladies and gentlemen, our chair, Shri Manoj Singh, Additional Chief Secretary. He is 1988 batch IAS officer of UP cadre. Presently serving as Additional Chief Secretary, Department of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Under his leadership, Government of UP is taking the climate action institutions. And our co-chair, Professor Anil K. Gupta, is an Indian scholar in the area of grassroots innovations. He is the founder of the Honeybee Network. He retired as a full-time professor at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad in 2017, where he served for about 36 years. He held an executive vice chair at the National Innovation Foundation and is also fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science. He was awarded the Padma Shri in the year 2004 for his contribution to management education. He has developed courses for students at the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. One of his most popular courses included Shodh Yatra, meaning research walk, under which he took management students to different parts of the country to learn from local communities and study their knowledge systems. And ladies and gentlemen, our eminent moderator for this session, Mr. Kirti Manavasthi, is a climate change and sustainability professional and works as Senior Policy Advisor at GIZ, India, where he is responsible for the climate change adaptation and climate finance readiness portfolio. He has long experience of strategic planning, policy, advice, community support, resource mobilization and knowledge management, covering issues of climate adaptation and resilience, climate risk management, climate finance, DRR and sustainable development as part of the bilateral, multilateral and non-governmental organizations. His works primarily focuses on sub-national adaptation policy and planning, where he worked on development optimization and revision of state governments on state action plans on climate change in India. And ladies and gentlemen, with those words of introduction, I hand over to our session moderator, Shri Kirti Manavasthi ji. Over to you, sir, to carry forward the proceedings.
Thank you so much and welcome everyone after the lunch. We have a very distinguished panel here today with Mr. Manoj Singh, Additional Chief Secretary to the Government of Uttar Pradesh, looking after environment, forest and climate change portfolio, and Professor Anil Kumar Gupta, former Vice President NIF, as a distinguished chair for this panel discussion on Localizing Resilience Agenda. There is a greater emphasis on localizing climate adaptation and DRR action to address the climate and disaster risk, with the realization that impacts are felt more at the local level. And to address this global challenge of climate change and the risk because of that, it's important to localize actions as much as possible and involve communities in those actions. How do we localize the actions to promote resilience, to strengthen resilience, build resilience, and ultimately contribute to sustainability, contribute to sustainable development goal, is something is continuously evolving. And there have been different approaches which have been demonstrated, some successful with some challenges, and also opportunities for further learning and also scaling up those efforts to promote those actions at scale. The approaches which have been looked at by engaging with the Panchayati Raj institutions, the approaches which have been looked at mainstreaming this climate and disaster risk into sectoral planning process. We have heard about different approaches in sectoral planning like disaster management plan that NIDM has been supporting with different ministries. At the national level, at the state level, the NDMA has been supporting. And also engaging with the Gram Panchayats, something that Government of Uttar Pradesh is looking at under the leadership of Mr. Manoj Singh Ji, Additional Chief Secretary. Before we begin the discussion on the topic, I would like to request all the panelists here for a release of a book. It's called Climate Panchayat, which is based on the effort that UP government has initiated on engaging with the Gram Panchayats to promote localization of the resilience agenda at the grassroots level. Thank you so much. This book has been edited by Shri Ashish Tiwari ji, Secretary Environment, Forest and Climate Change, based on the effort which his department has led under the overall guidance of Shri Manoj Singh ji. We will hear more about this initiative and what has been the learning and challenges in the subsequent session. But before we move forward, I would like to invite the chair, Shri Manoj Singh ji, for his opening remark on the theme.
So, good afternoon to all of you. After lunch session is always a heavy session. So, before giving a talk on disaster, or this whole session is devoted to climate change, and climate change is an impending disaster which is going to fall upon all of us in next 10 years, and it is falling today also. What I feel as a bureaucrat, because I will talk about public administration, before that I will talk about the climate change and how much you understand about it. In order to understand climate change, you have to understand Mother Earth. If the noise level goes down, I will be more comfortable. Okay, so, you know, our Mother Earth is 4.5 billion years old. 4.5 billion years old. And if we encapsulate the history of Mother Earth into 1 year, suppose Mother Earth was born on January 1. You know when the humans arrived on this earth? It was just 1 minute before 12 o'clock on 31st December. We just have 1 minute history in the entire 1 year condensed life of Mother Earth. Dinosaurs have 3 months of history. And what we have done, in just 1 minute, we have destroyed the Mother Earth. Not only the Mother Earth, our fellow colleagues the biodiversity is lost, the animal species are becoming extinct, and we have exacerbated anthropogenic climate change. Our Mother Earth went through climate change in ancient past 5 times. And the last one was PETM, which is Paleocene Eocene Thermal Maxima. And this was the maximum that our Mother Earth reached because of climate change. But now we have exceeded that by 5 times. And we have exceeded, and we are exceeding every day. The Earth has a mechanism, it has a resilience. We talk about resilience. It has an automatic mechanism of cleaning the carbon dioxide, the carbon emissions that goes into atmosphere. The geochemistry is like that whatever is thrown up during the rainfall, the carbon dissolves in the rainfall as a carbonic acid, is come down, goes to sea, and from in the sea, the animals extract that carbon dioxide and make calcium carbonate cell. It's a beautiful mechanism which has evolved in millions of years. But this mechanism is failing. If you have 5 times more than what is cleaning, it's like cleaning a city. There will be more garbage, and there is more garbage in the air. And what this garbage is doing, it is raising the temperatures. Not only raising the temperature in leaps and bounds, it is also having collateral damage on our Earth. So what we should do now? So if you understand this in that perspective, the first thing that is very important is to inculcate, all of the administrators and non-government officials are over here. First of all, inculcate environmental ethics in yourself. And that was, we had a teaser in our first climate change conclave, which was organized on 30th October 2021, which was precursor to Glasgow. And Honorable Chief Minister came over there, and there was lots of participation thanks to Kirtimanji and Ashish. They organized such a beautifully that there was a participation from all stakeholders and from all segments of the society. And we made that event climate neutral. We are having this event. This is not carbon neutral event. We calculated the carbon footprint of each and every delegate. What is his footprint via airplane, what is travel, what is hotel staying, what is conference. And then we planted simultaneously on the same day 46,000 trees. Ladies and gentlemen, it's an enormous, indomitable task. Every human being on this earth has to plant 302 trees. Still, we will be missing the target. So how to reduce this emission? We thought, I am from Forest Department, we should do plantation, but we could have done over here by buying solar power. If you make your home carbon neutral home, you just have to have 8 kilowatt of solar added, which is equivalent to 3,600 trees, which makes your family carbon neutral family. Whatever in your life the whole family has taken from emitted in the Mother Earth is again sequestered. These kind of environmental ethics is needed. And what was our teaser? Our teaser was very simple. That a man dies, he goes to Yamaraj, where Chitragupt has his all records kept, and Chitragupt had earmarked 30 marks for environmental ethics, and he scored 0. And he, though being a pious, honest, and a man of integrity, he went to hell. The message is clear, because in India, whatever is religious ideology, if the religious person talks about this, people will catch up in rural area. So with this background, I will like to invite you to what UP has done in last 2 years with regards to climate change. First of all, Environment, Forest and Climate Change Department are twinned together. So whatever is decided in one is implemented by other. And not only that, we have a synergy with other departments. So we went for this climate change conclave. We heard all these august people over there. We documented it, deep dived into their recommendation, and then we thought that we should come up with a climate action plan of the state. And when we were talking to different principal secretaries and additional chief secretary, everyone was saying, bemoaning that where did the finance come? But there was a beacon light in form of our chief secretary who came to the seminar and he told, again, look into your schemes. And when we looked into our schemes, the money which is flowing, we found that 80% of finance is already there in the budget. So we talk about green finance, 80% finance, we just needed 20% more to implement our climate action plan in UP. And then we prepared this state plan which has been submitted to Government of India. Then we thought, let's go ahead. We had a conference of panchayat. UP has a 58,000 panchayat. Now the IT infrastructure is so robust that every panchayat has a mechanism where we can talk to pradhans one-to-one online. And we had this conference of panchayat attended by Chief Minister, attended by Union Cabinet Minister for Panchayati Raj, Giriraj Singh Ji, and there was a good participation, though we had to coax them, but it was a good participation, and 30,000 Pradhan participated, and we talked about environment, disaster, climate change, whole day. And then what happened is, the people became aware. And then we found out, talking to the Pradhans, it's so easy to make a climate neutral panchayat. You just have to install 0.5 megawatt of electricity, solar electricity. 5 acres, 6 acres of land is always there. 5 crore rupees can percolate down from any scheme to each village in 3-4 years, and you can just add it. The resilience is there in village. The urban area are lacking in resilience. The village person, if they are taught about this, do know about disasters. Recurring disaster, they are well aware. They have a behavioral response also. But for new disasters, if you tell them, they will adapt immediately. But the adaptation in urban area is very, very poor because we all think that we are all educated. But let me say one thing, as far as ecological intelligence is concerned, we are zero. None of the CEOs, none of the business people understand what is the ecological intelligence. And we talk about our children's about IQ. No, we have moved ahead. From IQ to EQ, emotional to social, which the politicians have. But now climate change is saying you must have ecological intelligence. Then only you are going to cope up with. Otherwise, 3.2 degree is what we are going towards, which will render lots of areas unbearable in summers, especially those areas which have high humidity, which will result in 20% loss of global GDP. And for agriculture production in India, last year we saw, in March only, the temperature rose and there was less grain formation in wheat. So already these things are changing. The whole thing is having impact. So what kind of thing we did was, we went ahead and made this village level plan, and all aided by GIZ, and we have now reached a level where this plan is there, and we are going to monitor. We have also devised formats for district collectors, for our district bureaucracy to monitor the climate change, environment and disaster every month. So this is what we are seeing in UP is evolution of the policy of climate change. And as far as resilience and finance is concerned, I told you 80% of finance is there, but we need finance not only from the national governments, but from international finance. We also need supports of business houses. If every business houses come up with their roadmap of when they are going to become carbon neutral, ITC is already a carbon negative company. The Tata Motors have made a roadmap of 2040 carbon neutral. If every business houses, their CEOs sit on the table, make a carbon neutral or carbon negative roadmap, our targets will be achieved. The funds which is required will percolate down, the processes will start, and we will see a radical change. What I am trying to say today to all of you, that this unwavering and tiresome approach has to be taken, not only at national level, at personal level also. And that's what you have to go and disseminate the information to the lower levels. Already our panchayats are talking about climate change, circular economy, plastics, solid waste management. So this is how we can percolate down and see that whatever plan we are preparing in coming days, it is implemented in letter and spirit, and we could pay our onerous duty towards Mother Earth and score high on our environmental scorecard, which is 30%. So, ladies and gentlemen, with this opening remark, again I thank you for the committee to invited me to this August gathering. And through this deliberation, through knowledge sharing, we will definitely gain, and we will like to improvise our whatever we have built up now, and we will also be sharing what we have done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. With this, may I also invite Professor Anil Kumar Gupta for his opening remark. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you, Kirtiman, Avasthi for wonderful beginning of this session, and Manoj Singh ji has already explained what UP government is doing, and I'm very happy when I read this climate panchayat. There are a few thoughts which came out from the introduction of the Chief Minister, that there is a tremendous scope for using biodiversity and associated knowledge system of the people. They've also come out with the concept of heritage trees, which will be conserved all over the state. Now I want to begin with some basic concepts which are very important for us, and I'm sure other panelists will draw upon these in their own way during the discussion on budget and finance for local level initiatives. The first is about relationship between risk and uncertainty. You see, when you look at rainfall, there is an inverse correlation between mean rainfall and the standard deviation. Lesser the rainfall, higher the coefficient of variation. What does it mean? It means that the uncertainty will be faced much more in the regions where rainfall is low. But not just that. Even in the regions where rainfall may be high, there could be uncertainty due to floods. So there comes a very interesting relationship between how the risk and uncertainty are correlated. A phenomenon may be uncertain over time, but its probability can be estimated over space. So regions where flood will occur, regions where landslide will occur, regions where drought will occur, we know very well. But when will they occur? We may not know. Therefore, the need for resilience. Therefore, the need for creating institutional framework at local level. You know, there was a study done at ICRISAT that the correlation between rainfall at around 1600 hectare distance was just 0.6, which essentially means that even at short distance, there can be high degree of variability. Therefore, the need for community action. Therefore, the need for capacity building at the community level. One side of the village has rainfall, another side doesn't have. In the regions where rainfall is low. So we cannot use highly generalized aggregative model. And to do that, we have to create a new kinds of monitoring systems. We must have, I was talking to Akhilesh, she said he had developed a model for predicting the variability at any location. Now we need to have such models and such monitoring systems that every panchayat, and I hope UP will take lead, should have climate monitoring station. So this is very important that Ajendra ji mentioned to me at lunchtime, and I checked it up just now, that in 15th Finance Commission, there was a recommendation made for a very large fund to create disaster resilience management and mitigation fund. This fund is going to be created now. So this conference has a very important role to play in making this fund. Akhilesh, this is your responsibility. NIDM should obviously take lead in making models of operationalizing this fund in different kinds of ecosystem viable. So this is, I think, a very practical target before us. 21, the recommendation has came. 22, 23 is going to be implemented now. So we really need models which district level and community level and block level institutions can adapt. Second thing which is very important is life. Prime Minister gave this lifestyle for environment slogan, pro people planet. Where would we find these people? All over the country such people are there. I was reading this book. At the end you have given many examples of such communities. The double-decker route bridge from Meghalaya. Those of you who have been to Cherrapunji would know I have walked over that bridge. It takes about 50 years to make. It lasts for 250 to 300 years, maybe 400 years in some cases. There is no better example of sustainability that we have in our country, anywhere in the country. To add community level initiative, which bridge would last for 300 years, 400 years, without any loss of its functionality. So therefore, we need to pick up such examples, the route bridge in Meghalaya, the Oran lands in Rajasthan, the tanks which have been maintained for 500 years without silting up, the Golden Temple tank, for example, which has not silted up for 500 years through community action. There is no other tank of which the capacity has not gone down the slightest bit in the country by using Karseva, by the people's collective action. So therefore, we need to consider today the operational guideline for life will be to make a database of such institutions, viable, functioning institutions, community institutions, which are maintaining biodiversity, which are conserving resources, which are providing the spur for low carbon and low variance ecosystems. The third suggestion I would like to make is, we have a National Rural Employment Guarantee Program. Just 10 days out of the 100, 10 days out of the 100 could be used for mapping. Sir, ye aap karwa dijiye. UP should take the initiative. We should map not only the biodiversity, but also the knowledge around biodiversity. 650,000 villages of our country. And with this knowledge of our communities will be very, very viable and fruitful for taking the next step, which is to go away from employment-oriented program to entrepreneurship-oriented program. I foresee a time, in 10 years' time, there will be Green Entrepreneurship Fund. The NREGA will become an innovation and entrepreneurship fund, which will provide young people an opportunity, like a rural startup campaign, where the workers who are just getting job for digging earth and making roads will actually then be setting up enterprises in situ value addition in the local resources. And through that, we will mitigate the climate risk and generate resilience. The last part that I want to mention about is how do we modify the budgetary and financial system such that the goals of this conference are fulfilled. Please appreciate, and Manojji, you know it better than any one of us, that in bureaucracy there's a tendency to give uniform allocation. Uniform for non-uniform conditions. What a great injustice, sir. In regions which receive more flood, regions which receive more drought, regions which have ravines, obviously they don't have same cost of providing various infrastructure. The cost of infrastructure is higher in regions which are more fragile, which are more climate vulnerable, which are more risky. And yet the allocation is same. So what happens then? The infrastructure is by design poor in regions where people face maximum risk and uncertainty. This needs to change. And I think a strong recommendation should go from this conference that we must try to go away from the policy of uniform budgeting for non-uniform conditions at the community level. And therefore, the fact is that in regions which are well developed, market forces will do a great deal of good. Wherever wages are lower than the minimum wage rate, please take my indicator. Wherever the prevalent wage rate is lower than the minimum wage rate, state needs to intervene through various programs at much higher level of allocation than the regions where market wage rate is higher than the minimum wage rate. Let markets work. So there is no case for implementing lot of programs of direct assistance in regions where market wage rate is double of the minimum wage rate, 500, 700, 800 rupees per day. Why should we intervene there? So I would say that in a liberalized, reform-oriented environment today in the country, we need to really reform the budgeting procedures and enable communities which are facing maximum risk and therefore needs more allocation of funds to deal with the resilience, because it is their contribution. Mind you, if people in the mountains top of the mountain don't conserve diversity, the siltation rate in the river will increase directly. But why should they maintain the forest? They don't get power from the power projects. They don't get any other resource. So we must make it possible. And in Switzerland, they have alpine 1, 2, 3, 4 zone. People who live on the highest mountain zone convert a loan of 50,000 francs into a grant if they stay there for 3 years. We don't want people to migrate out from those regions if ecosystems have to be maintained. So I would strongly recommend that mountain tops, the regions which are vulnerable, we should provide extra incentives to people to stay there and maintain the landscapes and maintain the biodiversity and prevent the deforestation so that the landslides don't occur more often and we do not have the resilience, a challenge to the resilience so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your opening remarks. I think we got some hint of the whole of government approach. When we talk about localizing resilience, we talk about the more participatory processes, multi-stakeholder engagement. We also got ideas for governance, ideas for financing, and also the ideas for resource allocation, that how, if we have to localize resilience, how these elements also need to be addressed moving forward. After this, if I can move to Mr. Ashish Tiwari, Secretary, Environment, Forest and Climate Change, Government of Uttar Pradesh, that how working on this localization of resilience agenda, and I remember the government of UP has also come out with a framework, it's called Road to Resilience 2030, aligned with the SDG 2030 goal. How does he look at localizing of resilience with focus on governance, the Panchayati Raj institutions, also the departmental engagement through horizontal integration also for localizing the actions which have been there in the different schemes and plans, including the State Action Plan on Climate Change. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Kirtimanji, and respected chair, panelists, and all participants. It's really my pleasure to present before you the whole kind of policy, governance, financing, and probably the implementation ecosystem which the state of Uttar Pradesh is trying to develop. And in the morning session, as rightly you can say presented by Mr. Praveen Pardeshi, that really we have to design such an ecosystem where we learn, our institutions learn by interactions, maybe by implementation, experiential kind of learning. So that is the whole idea actually which we have adopted under the leadership of our Additional Chief Secretary Manoj Singh Saab in the state of Uttar Pradesh. It's whatever we discuss in conferences, like conference of parties, whatever charters, whatever agreements, and whatever you can say treaties are there, ultimately they have to be localized so far as the implementation is concerned. The real challenge lies in how to actually implement it at the grassroots level. Coming back to the demography of the state of Uttar Pradesh, by size and by population, it has population of 250 million, over 250 million, 58,000 gram panchayats, over 750 urban local bodies. It's not a state, it's a country. It's bigger than United Kingdom. So the mainstreaming of climate action, DRR, and the resilience in such a bigger, you can say, sub-national level is really a challenge. The whole story, I will take it forward. The vision and the policy is already presented by our ACS. But the challenge is actually how to kick off the climate action. We always make a mistake by thinking that climate action is something different. It is different from our policies, ongoing policies. It is different from our ongoing development. That is the kind of mistake we made. This learning came when a state action plan for climate change was being formulated, and we started doing kind of a financial resource mapping to implement that plan. Because our chief secretary was very, very clear that don't come out with a plan where you don't have resources. You plan whatever you can actually do. So when we started mapping the financial resources, to our utter surprise, we found that, as already mentioned by Manoj Singh sir, that if we duly converge our schemes for climate action, which are already there, the only thing is little bit of tweaking, little bit of making climate sensitive projects. Like, for example, if we take the Manrega scheme, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, I think it is the best climate sensitive scheme in the world. The kind of list of works which can be taken up under that scheme are 100% on climate side. So then we started mapping those schemes, and a good exercise has been done, and we probably could solve our problem of climate financing by just integrating the climate concerns in ongoing development works of the government. So that is the first learning coming from there. The climate is something not very, very different. It is well, the only thing it has to be mainstreamed. Second thing is, what we learned and what we are also implementing, there has to be integrated planning for climate action. If we come out with a different plan at village level, then probably nobody would be able to implement, and no institution is there to implement it. So we have started making efforts to integrate our village level climate smart action plan under the larger Gram Panchayat development plan. And for that, really capacity building is needed. And thanks to GIZ, we have done a good amount of capacity building in the same way, kind of experiential learning for panchayats, because they don't understand the structured training. We have selected one village each as a pilot in our 39 climate vulnerable districts. And there actually we have hired non-governmental organizations also who are working at the grassroots level to impart kind of a experiential knowledge to the village stakeholders community for doing climate planning. So climate smart action plan of pilot village is our strategy. If one village pilot can be made successful in the district, then probably the agenda for mainstreaming of climate action will slowly cover the whole district. Similarly, we are also planning for climate smart cities, climate smart districts, and we have also selected and been working on them. The biggest learning is that there are many organizations working in the field of climate change, but they are all, we found, particularly for the state of Uttar Pradesh, that they are working in silos. The best thing which our state action plan has done for the state is that it's a comprehensive plan. The agriculture department is having a World Bank funded project for kind of a water efficient agriculture, or in other words, you can say climate adaptive agriculture. So when the World Bank team visited our department for consultations, we have just provided them the larger plan of the state. So they were very happy that our planning is already being done by the forest department. We have to just focus draw our attention towards sustainable agriculture mission. So we have to have a larger plan in the state, and we should motivate all the organizations to work in duly allocated regions within that plan. So this is how you can draw a kind of a resource efficiency, financial resource efficiency in your planning. The village level, I think there are many schemes. My ACS sir was also mentioning that Amrit Sarovar scheme of Government of India is actually the climate sensitive scheme, and how you can join the dots. If suppose rural development department is rejuvenating ponds, the forest department and the forest department functionary at the village level can go for plantation around those, and the soil which is coming out can go for construction of road bunds. So everything can be joined, and it really becomes a good circularity in everything. Otherwise, for one expressway is coming, then the soil is being dug from somewhere else. But if we can just direct those projects that soil should be dug from the to be rejuvenated ponds, they may be little far away. That way we can join all the dots and work in a single direction. For capacity building, and for the behavioral change, also we are developing such modules which are more than a beautiful, you can say interesting, you can say video clip, where in the local language, all kinds of capacity building has to be in local language. Otherwise, and the role of NGOs would be very, very, grassroots level NGO would be very, very important. Lastly, the biggest challenge for the localization of climate action and resilience is the knowledge network. We should not build a parallel knowledge network. The universities, the institutions which are there at the district level, they have to be well capacitated for of knowledge which is needed for localization of climate action at panchayat, at district level, and a bigger umbrella institute like NIDM, etc., can actually impart kind of a capacity building to those institutes. So that kind of a knowledge network we are trying to build up. Professor Mal is here from ISD Varanasi. He is also having a good mandate to build capacity to the grassroots level institutes. There is a university in Chitrakoot which have to own the responsibility of localizing climate action, imparting knowledge. And of course, sharing of best practices is the best way. We have invited all kinds of climate heroes who have done best work in the field of climate change, and the kind of experiential sharing with our village representatives was very, very beneficial for them. So with these words, this kind of ecosystem is being developed in Uttar Pradesh, and I think I met many educational institution representatives, ministry representatives also in this conference. We invite you all to the biggest country of India and biggest country in South Asian region to work with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think Mr. Tiwari touched upon a number of elements, or I would say enablers, which will support this localization through governance, strengthening the governance mechanism and also the financing processes as well. But what was one of the most important aspect was the multi-stakeholder engagement. And I think there's a realization that being addressing climate or disaster risk is not going to be the topic of one department agency. It has to be multi-stakeholder engagement, not just the government agencies, but also the non-government organizations, which he also talked about. And how can these multi-stakeholder networks, for example, and I understand UP has also looked at setting up a network of different organizations, academic organizations, civil society organizations to work together. How such networks actually can be useful, not for only horizontal integration, but also vertically, like engaging with the national organizations, agencies, also international organizations for experience sharing and learning, will be an important aspect in terms of localization of resilience agenda. And to have more insight.
Namaskar,
and
my name is
more,
Rajiv Shah
learning,
from Keio University, Japan.
Dr. Ranjan Panda
My sincere
from the CCC network to share his experiences and insight. I forgot to mention initially like 7 to 8 minutes, and I think Mr. Tiwari was well within that time. And so he is for all the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And Professor Anil Gupta and other colleagues at NIDM for inviting me. And it's a great honor to share a dais with my teacher, Professor and another Gupta. So great to be here. I'll definitely try to stick to the time. So my part of the job is actually to bring in some inputs from the grassroots. So there are other colleagues who who also work on rather global issues. So there are two ways to look into the resilience building at the local level, and actually financing is definitely an integrated part of that. I'll come with a story first. When we started to understand climate change, early 90s, that was from the villagers. So how we were doing a perception study on people of the seasons, how seasons change. Villagers were very much aware in early 90s that thing is changing, and kind of birds are behaving differently, plants are flowering differently, and the summer is actually setting in earlier, and that's why flowers like mango, mahua, these were all actually flowering bit early than they were supposed to. So that these were very clear early signs how climate change was actually impacting the local ecosystems. So come to the latest scenario. So plants have actually just become saplings. So that is a perception change that has happened, and starting from rural, the transition from rural areas to urban areas is, in one word I could say, a biodiversity rich forest, a sapling, planted tree, lot. So that is where I wanted, and that is also related to the topic that I mostly work on is water. So understanding the ecosystems around fresh water, understanding the ecosystems around biodiversity rich forest is something that is actually first degrading in the society and any other. Ecological ethics that are being taught, the ecological that was being taught is actually we're losing very fast. And that is where is something our resilience building efforts actually need to talk more on, So that is, and if we want to build around that, I think one section that we are now trying to work with are the youth. So that's why, because, the youth have just seen climate change at a time when they don't know this is climate change. For me, it's like, okay, climate is changing. I experienced a summer much later. I saw these kind of species. I saw a lot of kind of, fruits that the youth is actually, they see apple all through the year. They see guava all through the year, the same size, same color. So for the youth, climate is changing, but definitely not the way that I have seen, or many of you have seen. So, over the last 30 years. So I think for them to understand climate change is a completely different world than for us to understand. And that is where I think, that's why they find that a concrete pond is also water body, and a used, lake is also a water body. So I think, but when the other system is a completely different ecosystem, unless someone has gone into jobs of a specialized kind, unless a youth has actually gone into a course that actually teaches ecosystems, they are not experiencing that. Still some rural areas in the hills, in the mountains, in the, in indigenous communities. Still the understanding is there, but our own study says that is also vanishing very fast. I think that's the reason I thought I will try to talk about, this particular phenomenon. You can pump in huge amount of money to planting trees, to restoring water bodies. But then who is going to sustain those knowledge systems? Sir was saying about the indigenous knowledge systems. That could also, from the very great example is how to, spend money on, understanding the ecosystems. Making an inventory of the biodiversity. So that, but who will make that? The youth, the current generation, people who have the energy, who have the, ability, and who have to be engaged, so that the knowledge is not lost. I think that is where we need to work. The second aspect that I want to bring is the entire thing of migration. Rural areas, people are migrating out. Cities are growing. In a world that almost 80% of people are in insecure water zones now, and more people are coming to that, because cities, they are bringing in a lot of rural people. That also means they are actually sort of asserting, or they are basically actually effecting a change in the knowledge systems. So many people who are actually planting trees or interacting with trees or interacting with water bodies at a different level are now daily wage laborers in the cities. So there, that entire connect with nature is now restricted to a dinky location in some urban slum. And unfortunately, that trend is going to develop much faster, because just within the next 30 years, almost 50 to 65% of people will be living in cities. And most of them are climate migrants as well. So many of them have come out of desperation, many of them has come out of aspiration. So the people who have come out of desperation because sea rise has happened, because drought has become permanent, because land degradation has become almost eroded their livelihoods, they are the people who will come very fast. But the people with aspiration will still come with some skill sets to cope with the city lives. So I think these are the two kind of people we are actually bringing into cities. How to utilize their knowledge, within the cities to restore water bodies, to restore the water systems is also something we should build in our resilience resilience structures, and to make that more sort of institutionalized. I would like to say that 75% of all the water sources that the cities get, including industries, they come from the water sets in the forests. Almost like 1/3 of all the large cities in the world, they get water from the forested water sets. So that is the connect that we also have through the ecosystems. The same connect we also have through the people they move. So I think these have to be integrated in a way that we can actually not only increase, because cities are going to be the next hub. There is no denial. Then how these cities can also, and cities don't have funds. I think the latest study said, RBI study said they only have 1% of the GDP as their own funds. Rest, they are dependent on other people. Climate finance is something that is new coming up, including the loss and damage facility maybe. So cities have to work out on their climate finance, and that climate finance, no matter from where it comes, should not only cater to the city needs. I think they should also cater to the needs of the water sets far off place, because dams bring water to Delhi, for example, in Himachal. So I think you just cannot use resources from the forest and you just don't care for the forest anymore. I think that is where one has to work out how these resilience models, can actually integrate both cities and the rural areas. I think these are a few of my points. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Panda. And I think when we talk about resilience, localizing resilience agenda, this migration and also the resource degradation become important, of course, both from the urban and rural context both. I would like to move on to Dr. Madhav Pai. from the World Resource Institute to share experiences on this. Also from the fact that WRI brings a lot of global experiences, but also experiences from states like Tamil Nadu, where WRI is supporting how can we go further local in terms of implementation of SAP-CC, for example, through district and village action plans. Thank you.
I have some slides. I thought I'll show some images.
Sure.
I'll stick
That'll be
to
great.
time. So,
The AV team, please.
yeah, they've got it. Yeah. Yeah, no, I thought since we have some specific experiences of working, I'll share some ideas of localizing adaptation, and then the bigger challenge is how do we mainstream it. At WRI, we started with these locally led adaptation principles. They are very theoretical. And so I just want to talk a little bit about our experiences of trying to actually implement one. And you just spoke about it, this work that we did in Tamil Nadu around we started with doing climate proofing of a district development plan for the district of Kodalur. And then basically that became the route for this new district climate mission that the state of Tamil Nadu has launched, and also now they have a climate smart villages mission. So this is just sort of one example of the other thing that we were very closely involved, and also Mr. Praveen Pardeshi also spoke about it, was this climate action plan for Mumbai. Again, this is a vulnerability assessment that we did, and is now a public document. So, and it was also shared in the local assembly, and it was accepted by the assembly, where we were also able to bring a lot of sort of geospatial maps, including overlaying landslide locations with slum settlements, etc. And you saw that, it was very, very strong correlation. And now that data is publicly available, we are starting to see a lot more support for community groups to actually do sort of locally led adaptation, locally led disaster management. This is broadly, Mr. Pardeshi spoke about these holding tanks from Japan. But, what we have seen is actually still the approach for flood management, for example, is very much hotspot driven, very much, pumps, they want to put pumps, holding tanks. But I think we need, the larger sort of catchment level approach is missing. And so I think, how do we then, so I think one of the things we are seeing is that people are very happy to adopt technology, but the adoption of science is not as fast. And I think, how do we do adoption of science in local government is one of our bigger challenges. So I'll show you this example also. This is, this is a small river called the Daisa River. And in the end, what we saw is, every monsoon there is a substantial loss that happens. And basically there is a simple bottleneck that happens when the sort of catchment, when the water is flowing down. Because on the right you have the Sanjay Gandhi National Park, and all of this water is coming down into the narrow catchment. Now, because these are two wards, and if you look at it at a ward level, you don't see that problem. So once you go to the catchment level, so how do you do this hydrological modeling, and how do you build this capacity? So actually a little bit of science can actually also help technology go a long way. That is what we were talking about there. So around that we've also done, we saw one other thing that we saw is, when they are modeling the Miti River, we need to now take into account the dynamics of the Arabian Sea. Otherwise, so what happened is there was, Miti is one of the main rivers in Mumbai, and it flows into the Arabian Sea, and there was a small outcrop. So they thought that they will they will cut the outcrop to allow water to flow faster. What actually happened is that tides started coming further in. Now once you have damaged, so again, a little more of that science is required, and I think how do we enable that becomes quite critical. Same thing with greening. One of the things that actually we did, using Landsat, we were able to show almost a 5 to 6 degree difference in land surface temperatures between, slum settlements and non-slum settlements, simply because of the lack of greenery. But the difference was quite substantial. It was almost 5 to 6 degrees. And then we saw that, there is a very much this number of trees planted approach. And so we have been really trying to push, saying, we need to move away from this number of trees planted approach to more about trying to increase tree cover, increase biodiversity, reducing land surface temperature. So really using these three things as indicators, I think, and then using a very careful approach of what sites you choose, then based on the sites, what species you use, and what methods you use, because this Miyawaki plantation also is happening a lot, and we are seeing that it is also completely then, the groundwater is being lost in 4 or 5 years, and then a lush forest sort of dies all of a sudden once the groundwater is. So I think a lot of care because we are making a big effort in the country to plant trees. I think we need to make sure that there is a little bit of science that is brought, and we use indicators that are more about biodiversity, tree cover, land surface temperature to better assess as we move forward. These are some work we have been doing in Bihar. Again, just an example of using geospatial analytics. So, this is to just show this. Actually, what you see is a lot of siltation that is happening along the banks. Also, if you see on the left of the embankment, there is already encroachment that have come, and so we are starting to see a lot of both flooding but also breaches in the embankment, both with combination of siltation and other things. So again, I think once we were able to present these sort of geospatial, sort of larger views, I think some better action plans got developed around sort of protecting these floods that are now beginning to happen very regularly along these sort of river embankments. As couple of other things to touch. I mean, we've also been working a lot on distributed solar. Again, so there actually we've worked in multiple locations, and there's a need to both look at sort of extreme heat, other water scarcity, other risks that can make sure that the resilience of this sort of distributed infrastructure that we are putting stays. So for that, we've actually also developed this toolkit. It is available, so you can go through a standard checklist and see certain sort of mitigation measures that you can adapt as you go through basically putting more of this sort of distributed energy infrastructure. And a couple of other things. This is just another thing which is to talk about the loss of permeability, loss of so again we have been able to, with geospatial analytics, quantify the amount of sort of water that gets diverted, etc. Because of urban development. So that just won't. And then finally, just wanted to I'll stop, but I'll just show you this, how also it becomes easier to communicate, right? So this is a road in Mumbai, and what we did is, this in 2014 there was no concreting, there was no metro. At that time, land surface temperatures were like this. In 6 years, once the metro and you saw almost a 6-degree increase, and this is in January to March, right? So it's going to be hotter in the summer, but you see almost a 6-degree increase in that section because of the concrete and all of this. So then we need to start thinking of sort of these kind of solutions. So I think just to say that I think, using a little more science, I think we can actually really develop much more context-sensitive solutions. And then, of course, the bigger challenge with all of this is to mainstream these ideas. But we are talking about really advancing the use of science, using more and more geospatial analytics, and really then finding tools and toolkits that communities also can use then to sort of, really implement these sort of locally led actions. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think the visuals were quite actually appealing, and also giving the first-hand experiences also about how do we go about localization, the importance of having a right knowledge base, the information and data that is required around that one. From this, let me move on to Dr. Ritesh Kumar, Director, Wetland International South Asia.
Hi, Kirtiman, is it okay if I...
Of course, perfectly fine. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's been an esteemed panel. Thank you, Dr. Gupta, for this opportunity to join this discourse. Dr. Gupta and I have been, over the last decade, have been seeing a trend that discourse and resilience, and especially when we approach it from a humanitarian angle, is very people-centered. But if you look at an ecological diagnosis, more often than not, the root of the problem lies in misinterpreting nature and misinterpreting how nature structures life. In the place where Dr. Panda comes from, I also happen to have spent at least 2 decades there, Mahanadi Delta, most productive part of Orisa's landscape. All livelihoods were historically very co-evolved with the flooding regime, with the pulse of the river. Then comes a colonial approach to jacket the river into embankments. What we do is, instead of controlling water in jackets, we create waterlogging because water can no longer move in the landscape. And now a flood-dependent landscape becomes flood vulnerable. And then we have a historical investment to keep on focusing on structural measures. I think the discourse on resilience has to pinpoint on one fact that a major proportion of disasters today are hydrometeorological in character. So the word hydro is very critical. So it is locked with water, it is related with water, so why not pinpoint on getting water more central in the discourse around resilience building. When we approach water, there are certain challenges. I have all support for a community and a village and a people-centered movement, but the problem is nature and water, they move in a scale. You can have a village which is climate proof, but if the landscape itself is not well managed, that single isolated island of prosperity can soon become a sea of despair because water has a scale. So we will need to understand that fundamentally these dots need to be connected. It has to be treated as an ecological hydrological network. There is a scale, there is an upstream, water has an upstream, water has a downstream, and these two issues need to talk to each other. And therein some novelty, I think. I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Gupta and his team on how to connect upstream and downstream through simple communication measures. I hope you will allude to that in your lecture. The second thing is water again is viewed differently by different sectors. As a disaster professional, you might see flood and droughts as your entry point. To a fisheries sector, they see revenue and all water that can be stocked with fish. And to a power person, it is a place where hydroelectricity could be born. And to a revenue person, it is a place where taxing can be done. To a nature person like me, I see a lot of aquatic life and birds which do not have a voice in the discourse. Now, somebody will have to bring all of this together to come up to a more consistent view of water, and especially the view of water as an ecosystem, as a source of life. To give you an example, we were faced with the challenge of developing a barrage operation rule in one of the wetlands in northeast Loktak Lake. And the lake has been completely altered by a decision to use that for hydropower, and the natural pulsing wetland had become a reservoir. Now in 2000, we pinpointed that the barrage needs to be done differently. But then we got at least 15 stakeholders in a room and said, what kind of hydrological regime would suit you? And then the hydropower person has its own barrier that water cannot go beyond a certain height because production would stop. The fisheries person would say that, water levels have to be constant because the aquaculture cannot work. Agriculture said, I need water in this time of the year. So water was viewed differently. So unless the hydrographs, right now the tendency is to have a very technocratic view of water, that this is the hydrograph based on which management should be done. Look at your reservoirs, there is an operations rule based on historical data. What nature is telling us that every day is going to be different. The future is going to be different. So we have to bring some information from the future back into managing these systems. So the hydrograph that we generated was nothing but a collative view of 10 to 15 stakeholders. Might be it's time to think about water and water systems differently, wherein different kinds of information could be brought together. And the third thing that I say, we need to connect stakeholders together. So sectors, scales, and stakeholders. Now, stakeholder connection is more trickier than what we have been seeing. I've seen lots of calls for participation, people's presence, but participation has largely become ornamental based on the list of people who have participated in your meetings. We'll have to take a deeper dive into participation. Everybody views water in a different way. A fisher not only fishes in waters, it is his or her cultural identity is associated with water. His relation, his temples, his faith, everything is around water. Now, where does this get integrated in participatory management? Where do multiple values, whose voices count, who is included? One who shouts the loudest, or everybody voices count? Now, we will have to take a deeper dive into participation and have genuine participation included. And finally, the issue of working with nature is, whatever, the smarter you get, nature will always come and tell you that you still need to learn. Nature is so complex that any statement saying that we know what will happen in 2050 can be put to naught within 2 or 3 years. The lesson is we have to be adaptive. We have to continually monitor our systems. The indicators need to be connected, from disaster professionals to hydrometeorologists to ecologists to sociologists. Bring those indicators together and let's start looking at them and say, what is nature telling us now? Was metro construction good or bad? Connect all those indicators together and we will have a full story. Now, I will close with one small observation. Yes, there is a lot of movement around creating ecological infrastructure, nature-based solution. But unfortunately, I've also been seeing emergence of new models of failure. Smart cities, for example, I won't name the city, but I've seen a lot of concrete being poured into natural wetlands, natural trees being uprooted to create plastic trees, and we call them as smart cities. Now, this is where things will boomerang. The flashy smart cities, a city will be smart only when it respects nature and people together. So with this, I close, and I invite all of you to take a further dig into the work that NIDM Wetlands International has been working together on how to integrate nature-based solution into district-level planning, and also guide us on what could be done more on this topic so that we take this agenda ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for enlightening us with this concept of 3S, the sector, scale, and stakeholder. And I think the scale of intervention for the localization will depend on the sectors that we are looking at and the regions that we are looking at. And I think let me move from here to Mr. Manu Gupta. Needs no introduction from Seeds, and giving a perspective of how do we go for his perspective of localizing the resilience agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Anilji, chairs of the session, fellow panelists. Pleasure to be here, as always, speaking to a lot of friends and learning from each of you. Just wanted to share a few thoughts on this very important agenda that is now taking center stage, and I'll kind of build on what my friends have earlier said, Ritesh, on the scale, on some of these community level initiatives. Just to give a one-line background about where I'm coming from, I'm basically a co-founder for Seeds, which is a humanitarian organization. And for much of the last 2.5 decades, we have been chasing disasters. All over the country, we've been addressing the needs of people. We've been trying to work with them on resilience building. Now, what is happening in the last 5 years, particularly at an organizational level, is that we are increasingly losing pace of the disasters. And that is where, the alarm bells, even within the organization, are now sounding loud about the scale of the challenge that we are looking at. Globally, of course, everybody has already alluded to facts and figures. Climate-induced disasters are doubling every decade. And even if you look at some of our expenditures, the national expenditures on relief, in the last 10 years, we have actually doubled from 14,000 crores annually to 29,000 crores being spent on disaster relief in a single year. Now, that's a serious issue that can affect our entire financing for the country. And in our estimate, we did an internal study. We found that by 2030, there will be 300 million Indians, 316 to be precise, according to the current population projections at very conservative levels, who will be impacted by climate in some way or other. And almost all the aspirational districts are covered in that. So for that, you can imagine that would be a double whammy. At the same time, we're looking at funding gaps. As I said, both organizationally and at systems level, we are finding that the funding gaps for loss and damage are increasing. And then, of course, the scale of loss, the diversity and the complexity of loss that we are seeing in the variety of disasters, in the way catastrophes are now striking, including the Joshimath example that we are seeing. So while we've been looking at mainstreaming risk in development programs and processes, I think it's now the scale of loss itself demands that we look at it the other way around. How can new products, instruments be tested and reimagined in this increasingly loss scenario if we have to build resilience at systems level. So fellow speakers have spoken about the need for bringing governments, civil society, and business houses together, and I wouldn't agree more. I think it is time that we need to join forces. The other big opportunity that is presented before us, and I want to speak a little more in detail on that bit, is what technology is doing in our country. I think with the advent of the digital public goods like the CoWIN portal, which is now being replicated across the world in some 70 to 80 countries, the UPI system, which I believe lately is being implemented in France and then many other developed countries around the world. I think use of digital public goods in this area of climate change, climate resilience becomes very relevant, and at the same time maintaining what these digital public goods do very well, maintaining the agency of people and not compromising on that. Seeds actually under the guidance of NDMA and many other friends in this room is now developing a digital infrastructure called Akshvi, which is India's first platform which records self-assessed losses and damage due to climate change. And we have actually prototyped this in 2022 in 3 locations. And it is giving very, very interesting insights. For example, it shows us that the losses experienced by communities is almost 2.5 times higher than the government norms for assistance. So which means that if I lose 100 rupees worth, I will only get about 30 rupees in assistance based on the existing norms. And even more stark is the fact that a household that is affected by disaster, going by the normal scale, would take 19 years to recover completely if it has to fend for its own. And my friend spoke about how they need to move to cities out of desperation. And these are some of those reasons why it happens. Also, the current relief and assistance disposition does not take into account the secondary effects that happen, the trauma that happens, the lack of access to education, to health, losing school years because of a disaster, because of climate change, are never ever compensated for. And those are becoming huge considering the numbers, both in terms of the population impacted as well as the increasing frequency of climate impacts. And I think this is where, this whole concept of building digital infrastructure, it's basically a loss and damage data highway that we would like to present, resulting in something like disaster e-wallets. I can speak more offline about it, which will then bring in these forces, not just the government, but also business houses, the civil society, to work on this whole platform that can then provide that can actually help from increasing from that 30% compensation or assistance that people get from the government to now at least 50 to 60%, so that they don't take so many years and they don't resort to desperate coping mechanisms. I think this reimagined systems has tremendous potential. It can provide us these actionable insights, and there is very, very advanced technology that allows multi-channel inputs. I think we as a country have really evolved that, and the entire financial inclusion piece is built on that kind of infrastructure that is now made it possible. Even narrowcasting early warnings that Ritesh you spoke about can be moved to this kind of infrastructure at scale. And most important, I think, it looks at long-term monitoring. The problem with the current systems, the humanitarian system, is that it is, in spite of our decades of effort, and I can vouch for that, we are still very much in the relief phase. Maybe the needle has moved a little bit towards preparedness, but the long-term investments that need to be there, and Professor Anil Gupta mentioned about the new fund that has been made possible by the 15th Finance Commission around mitigation and resilience building. I think it's the right time to actually shift that needle further than what it has in these 20 years. I think with these few words, let me close. These are some of these ideas that we feel bring in the necessary finance and bringing the necessary localization without letting go the agency of people, which is very, very important in a complex societal system that our country has. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think we had very diverse and rich set of input from the panelists. I also have few questions for the panelists, but before that, I would like also to open the floor to the delegates that are in the hall for their any input or questions for the chair and the panelists here. I see one hand, okay, from, I think, Neha, UNEP, okay, and Manas also here raising his hand. I see, okay, my colleague Soumya from GIZ.
There's one there, you can see.
Okay, sorry, I'm unable to see, okay. So we have 4 and 5. Okay, so 5 will take the questions and then we'll request panelists to respond to that one. So to begin with, Neha, to you.
Thanks, Kirtiman. So thank you so much. It was such a great learning experience today. It was a great panel. And I just have a quick question. So we all heard from you from Dr. Ranjan sir about the rich knowledge systems at the grassroots level, but we also heard from Dr. Ritesh about the need for, that we need, that participation is becoming ornamental. My question is this: we also have been hearing our concerns about working in silos. My question is this: at the grassroots level where everything converges, how do we make sure that limited resources are maximum utilized to ensure effective, action? That is my question. Like, how do we because we know that there are multiple organizations doing multiple projects at the grassroots level, but at the end, the communities have to ultimately implement it themselves. How do we make sure that there's maximum utilization of limited personnel, limited resources, etc.? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if you can introduce also for the benefit of the panelists.
I'm Neha Kurian. I work with UNEP on the Ikodiara project, and I work closely with the Kerala Institute of Local Administration in Kerala that works with local self-governments. Thank you.
Thank you. Manas?
Hello, sir. My name is Manas Dwivedi, and I work with GIZ.
Can you please use the mic? Thank you.
Can you hear me? Hello, sir. My name is Manas Dwivedi, and I am working with GIZ as an advisor climate change. So my question is how the concept of green recovery will support localization of resilience agenda.
Thank you. We'll take all the questions. Moving to Soumya, over to you.
Thank you, Kirtiman. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Soumya, and I work as an advisor with the climate change team of GIZ India, based out of New Delhi. Thank you to all the panelists for really great inputs and experience sharing from the different fields. My question is that at the state level, when we talk about whether it is localization or whether it is about bringing different stakeholders together, we all know that a lot of government mandated processes are ongoing, and many of you are already engaged in those, like the state action plans on climate change, or whether the disaster management plans at the state level, which help in bringing different stakeholders together at the state level for developing actions and strategies for climate change and disaster management. So how can these processes and documents, which we all are aware of, can support localization at the sub-state level or at a district level? And where do you see the challenges or the barriers for localizing these state strategies and where do the opportunities lie? So it will be great if any of the panelists can reflect on this question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the one question, yes, please.
Thank you, sir. Pretty lucky that I am talking to, I heard from all of you, and there has been a wide range of enlightening knowledge. But since I come from an area, I work for the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, and I'm a town planner. So what happens is when we speak to different states on the same subject, we find that there are two different concerns. One is that while one state is acting on a certain subject, the other state across the boundary is not actually looking at the same things in the same perspective. So even then they are sharing the same region, the lookout and the way of addressing the facts at both the ends are different, and therefore while they are probably managing up to that point, the carryover in the next state doesn't allow them to implement it successfully. So one is that. The other is, while we were working in the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, we were trying to tell the states to do a river-sensitive master plan based on the Namami Gange mission. So they were trying to address it in their state of Assam, while Meghalaya was in a different poise, and the river Brahmaputra flowing from China was another concern. So there were two things, international and national.
So I think we got about the administrative boundaries on, especially in the transboundary kind of.
Right, across boundaries.
So, yes, thank you so much. If I can quickly go to this side, yes.
Thanks for giving me the floor. My question is particular to Dr. Madhav. He has told about the green infrastructures that are being planted in the Mumbai city. So my question is that the green infrastructures have been planted as nature-based solutions by taking some modeling concept, or what is the criteria of implementing it? Like in UK, they have adopted the model like the I-tree model. So on the basis of the I-tree model, they first differentiate and then they will implement. So what are the India's efforts in this context? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have 5 questions, and sorry before, because I'm also getting these messages from the timekeeper. So if we can go back to the panelists for quick response, like 1 minute each for the different questions. Questions also very diverse, so I will leave it to your judgment which question you would like to pick and respond. Thank you.
I can take the river basin question if time. Yeah, I think thanks. I'll just take the interstate basin question. That's something I think what Ritesh was trying to say is if water is central to our planning, then I think a lot of the other challenges can actually be solved, because that's the problem is we don't realize the interconnectedness of the within the basin with other ecosystems. So when it is a basin approach, I think many of the other ecosystem issues can be taken, but the problem is our laws and legislations at the moment do not allow a cooperation on interstate river basins. They only come, some sort of interaction only comes when there is a conflict, the Interstate River Basin, Disputes Act. So I think beyond that, we don't have legal mechanisms for the moment. So it is only when special projects like Namami Gange, but then there will be always administrative boundaries. But the wisdom is actually, in our view, is that river basin based approach in planning should be a way to fight a lot of this climate change issues that actually we are now suffering from. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if I can go back to Mr. Tiwari about this, how can we use the state level processes and mechanisms like SAP-CC, the DM plans, to support this localization agenda? Is there any thinking around that one? And what are the opportunity or challenges that exist?
Yeah, okay. I think partially I would answer your question, and partially like your question from UNEP, I forgot your name. Like there is a way of consultative planning. Everything should begin from a consultative planning which leads to actually capacity building, which we have felt in the state of Uttar Pradesh, there are two ways of developing a plan. One nodal agency plans it, and after preparation of the plan is like shared with everyone, and the other stakeholders may find time, may not find time to give their inputs. The other way around is to involve round of consultations, involve all of them in round of consultation, try to understand their schemes, their budgeting estimations, etc., integrate their monitoring kind of a framework and integrate all of them into one plan. That leads to a good capacity building and a good, you can say, a good platform to start all implementation of climate action plan. The same thing can also be done at the village level. Like Gram Panchayat development plans, the vision is for developing for 5 years. So while developing GPDP for 5 years, I think there has to be a very clear-cut climate concerns to be well integrated into a larger plan. Like for next 5 years, from 0 year to 5 year, we should have one plan which should also have disaster concerns, adaptation concerns, and the regular, you can say, the development concerns also. So that plan, if is there, developed through a consultative process, then that will definitely lead to the maximization of, you can say, optimization of resource pooling, etc. Like in the state of Uttar Pradesh, many corporates are coming forward under a new concept called private panchayat partnership. So now for whichever village we are having a long-term 5-year plan, we are just simply giving, sharing that plan with the corporates, and from there they pick up the activities which they actually want to. So this is how actually we can optimize the resources which are available for a village level plan, and so far, and the same as for a state level plan. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think there's also a question on the green recovery, and I think this is also somehow, I would believe, the link to the issue of migration to Dr. Ranjan Panda about, you touched upon that topic as well. Because this concept of green recovery came a lot in the discussion, especially when we looked at the reverse migration issue during the COVID pandemic. But the challenge on the ground remains same when they go back to rural areas, the environmental degradation or other challenges because of which they migrated in the first place. So how do we look at this concept of green recovery? Because unless we address that challenges, so localization will not meet its objective, the agenda of resilience.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very big and complex question. But the idea here is, green recovery itself, if it is a resilience model, then I think a lot of migration can be checked at the local level itself. But then the new kind of migrants that are being added are the climate migrants. So they're not new in a sense, but the terminologies are changing. Many countries are calling them the internally displaced people now, IDPs. India has not yet accepted that definition. But then I think almost 30 million new climate migrants are added every year in the world. So these people are basically a byproduct of the kind of sea level rise, drought, and other both slow onset and fast rapid disasters. I think a lot of these ecosystem based approaches ideally could solve a bit of this problem, but then the other thing is that people will definitely migrate, either due to desperation or in aspiration, to the cities. That's because we create everything in the cities. So I think it's very difficult to say that people will not migrate, but then some of the local, as I think some speaker was saying or sir was saying, that you have to keep those people there. Otherwise, they are the guardians. Like we did a study in indigenous forest protected areas in India, and at least one household is protecting at least 15 acres of forest on an average. But then what we as urban citizens are doing, we are actually using the same number of forests in our lifetimes maybe. So if that is the equation, then we should actually see that these people are, the ecosystem services they provide should be paid for, in ways that they stick to those areas and they don't lose out on the amenities that we are losing out. For example, if I am getting a good hospital facility because I am staying in a city, if I am getting that in the rural areas, and if I am living in a sustainable environment, which is actually the whole world is aspiring at the moment, in the name of the UN has also sort of said that living at peace with nature, which the cities are not doing. So I think if we can actually have work together and make this complicated thing a bit more simpler and pay for the ecosystem services in various ways, as the UNEP colleague was also saying, by integrating all these schemes together in a way that people can actually stay back to the extent possible without losing out on the basic amenities and other prosperities that others are. So many people don't aspire for money. We have lived in tribal areas. They really don't aspire for the money that we are actually aspiring for. But what they aspire is definitely a good hospital, a good education, a good facility, good food security always. So I think these are some of the aspects we need to work on. But I don't have a clear and simple answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and it will be an injustice if I don't go back to the young expert who had raised the hand here for a question. I think you had, yes, please.
Thank you so much, sir. Respected dignitaries, my name is Ashmita Behra. I am from Niger, Bhubaneswar. I am a PhD research scholar. So it is, I have 2 points. It is little bit disheartening to see any one of the female panelists, there is no one. So it is little bit disheartening. And my second point is that when we are talking about local level participation, there comes the point of ethics in disaster management. So we are seeing in the field level that during cyclone or any type of natural disaster, upper caste people are not allowing the marginalized people to stay in the same shelter homes. So can we do something at the policy level or make some stringent policy so that people will fear to do something like that? So that is my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks a lot for highlighting that one. This was actually my question also from my side. I was keeping it for the last one. That when we talk about localization and community engagement, how do you look at this aspect of gender inclusion and the role of women especially in promoting this localization agenda for resilience? So with this question and also my question, over to the panelists. Thank you.
It's very interesting what you say. The manel, not the panel, is that certainly something for Akhilesh to work on, and I think your point is well taken. Absolutely right on the spot, and you needed to say that. Coming to the second point, Jagjivan Ramji, when he was railway minister, he did something interesting. At each railway station, the people who will offer drinking water were from scheduled caste. You are thirsty, drink water at the hand of the scheduled caste person. That was a revolutionary step. And it was done at all railway stations, wherever this was required. I think we need such radical steps, where we will have to break these barriers that you rightly mentioned. But please don't think that these barriers will go away easily. There are wells in some of the states for different communities. And it so happens that if the water is available during drought year only in the well of the scheduled caste, the high caste people won't mind going to that well and taking water from there, but not the other way around many times, But I think the nature is a great equalizer. When there's a drought, it doesn't spare the field of anybody. When there's a flood, it doesn't spare the field of anybody. So you raised a very poignant point that if there is shelter and there is a community dispersed, I would say the government should not provide any relief to that shelter where there's a discrimination. Very simple. No argument about it. As a public servant, as a public agency, our role is to provide inclusiveness.
So this is somewhere I think tolerance, there should be zero tolerance for discrimination, for exclusion, and for practices which are not in line with our constitution. So therefore, your point is not only as to what should be done, the point is what should be done, and which is no tolerance for exclusion, either of women or of other caste communities. And this is possible. There are many other examples where inclusiveness is coming up. And, there's a reservation in Panchayat for 35% for women in Gram Panchayats. There is also seats which are reserved in our electoral politics for certain communities. So there are seats from where only the scheduled caste person can stand in the election. So there are many steps that our society has taken to bring little more in cooperation. In civil service, I mean, I must tell you that this is one area where the Indian civil service had achieved 100% completion of the quota. We may not have been able to accomplish that in IMA for some time, though we have now been able to achieve it. But civil service achieved much earlier because they started a special capacity building program in the State Institute of Public Administration for these people to come into the system. So I think special capacity building program will have to be designed for leadership, for getting opportunities. Though there is a scheduled caste corporation, but maybe it can do better job than what it is doing. But please understand that the people who suffer the most are the ones who are least capable at the moment because of assets and or access to knowledge and education. And therefore, greater inclusiveness is the need of the hour. And you must have been seeing a lot of discussion is going on in elite institutions that, why shouldn't PhD students also be incorporated from those communities? And I'm a great supporter of the reservation. And I believe that we must provide for this kind of support maybe once in lifetime, maybe only when you have to enter the system and not continuously, but there's a need for such support. So thank you so much for your question.
Can I also? One thing I will add from the government side, which you see the budget of any state, it has a earmarking of 20% as a special component plan. So if UP budget is 5 lakh crores, 1 lakh crores will be marked as a special component plan which will percolate to scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. There are earmarked schemes and they will go there for either housing. Housing is the main need because Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, we have lots of funds over there, but it is insufficient for UP. So we have a Mukhyamantri Awas Yojana for scheduled caste, and now still lots of corporate bodies are joining hand and they are also making housing. So there is a earmarking of funds. So funds paucity is not there. As far as the sociological and psychological concept is there, 90% of the village, such kind of discrimination has vanished because of these panchayat elections, which are, again, you have reserved constituencies and these keep on moving. For example, this village, if it is unreserved in the next election, it can become reserved. So these keep on moving. But there are enclaves. In long run, it will definitely, we will see more like the social stratification will go away and it will give to more equal society.
Sir, with permission,
I'll just, sir.
Sir, with permission, can I add, sir, shelter management, sir? One permission, sir.
We'll get back to you, please. Just give me a minute.
No, I think I was just only, since you are from Orissa, I think that's a very important question. This discrimination in relief and all. I think we had situations in Orissa, but Dr. Das from OSDMA can tell you, we had very perfect example. OSDMA has done tremendous work on, sort of making it inclusive, working with many grassroots NGOs. So I think, as sir was saying, definitely this is completely, this something it will stay in the society. But then what we can do in relief distribution, at least what has been done in Odisha is, I have seen it, is that actually very special, arrangements have been made and special strategy has been made to see that nobody is discriminated. So in that sense, I think that's a good model. So there could be, these are of course temporary things. The society needs to change, and for that you need a lot of more kind of intervention. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Very brief input, but after that we will go to the co-chair for their final remarks, concluding remarks, and also giving us the guidance for future on this particular theme. So yes, very brief.
Sir, I am Gyanadas, Executive Director, OSDMA and Additional SRC. Responding to the questions he was raising, sir, actually. In Odisha, all the cyclone shelters or flood shelters constructed after Super Cyclone 99 have been handed over to the communities for management and maintenance. These are not managed by the government. So there is a CSMC or Flood Shelter Management Committee, and whose president is normally the local PRA Sarpanch, and there is a secretary who is elected by the community users. And the committee comprises women, local SHGs, Anganwadi worker, ASA, as well as also people belonging to AC, ST and other marginalized communities. And these community members manage the community shelter and keep it in such a manner that all persons who are likely to use during a flood or cyclone can use it also. And they raise funds. So as such, there is no discrimination at the level of cyclone shelters or flood shelters being debarred to anybody or not being allowed to anybody. At the same time, the members also are oriented every 2 years how they have to manage and make it useful also. Thank you.
Now I would like to go back to our chair for the concluding remarks and the guidance.
Thank you very much. So we are coming to the close of this session. Lots of knowledge has been gained, and we will try to see that this is implemented in UP. One of the issues was raised about how to situate, how to let people live in rural area, how to create more jobs. And one of the experience that I wanted to share regarding the greening element also, in UP, we have planted 35 crores tree last year. And this year we also want to plant 35 crore trees. And till now, in last 5 years, we have planted 100 crores. And we have to plant in next 5 years 175 crore trees. Now this tree is growing and planting is done by 29 departments in their collaboration. And almost all stakeholders, village level, district level, join hands, and we have earmarked specialized forest like Miyawaki forest. We have Shakti Van, again raised by women, then Bal Van, then we have a food forest where from a very small area all elements of fruits and food can be taken. So these kind of community involvement through which we have achieved this, and we have matched this with our climate change target, which is to sequester 0.20 billion tons. You know, India has to sequester 2.5 billion tons by 2030. So we disaggregated it at the state level, and we have made the plan, and we are going back that carbon sequestration targets. And the best thing that has happened is dairy joined the bandwagon, and they are giving carbon credits for agroforestry. And when we computed the income of farmer, especially in Western UP, what they are getting from selling of agroforestry products like timber products, that is not only doubling the farmer income, but tripling the carbon locked in that, $6 per tree, gives him a tripling of farmer income. So this could be for UP, agroforestry could be boom, not only for farmers, for carbon sequestration, for furniture-based industry, for other products, and there is a value chain over there. And we didn't realize that this value chain was existing, but when we was talking about climate change, when we rediscovered this value chain, and we are trying to put that in place. And that is one of the model which will keep the farmer in villages. They will not migrate. The second thing about urban greening, Hyderabad has this urban greening corporation, and we studied that there is lots of scope of planting trees in urban areas. And if the community involvement, urban community involvement takes place, species selection, choice of the location could be done, And there could be the urban development body which makes the infrastructure of urban area should now come up with the greening plan of urban area so that you can see lots of greening coming in urban areas, and also about flood mapping in urban area, which is also very important. So these were some of the things. In this conference, we got an insight of lots of things. One was the biodiversity aspect, that became life. Life is our Honorable Prime Minister's slogan, and we are now mapping what is the recycling component, reduce, recycle, and reuse component in our material use. And if this could be mapped, and if, as said, if we could have special important learning experiences from different regions, we can collate them and distribute. And one more question was asked regarding documentation. Really, documentation is a weak aspect in district level, but we want universities, colleges existing in district level to document it so that we can gather all the information regarding best practices which are going on there. So these were some of the things that which came in this conference. We have noted it down. And as far as our state is concerned, we will definitely like to see a step way forward in whatever suggestions have come. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I could actually see during the discussion that he was also talking to Mr. Tiwari about a few things that can be initiated immediately based on the discussion here in Uttar Pradesh. Thank you so much. So over to you.
Thank you. I must say that I've learned a lot.
I have learned a lot today from my friends, and I was recalling some of the work done earlier, which I think has been recalled, resituated in the new context by colleagues here. I'll make some observations which may help in carrying forward the lessons of this session and the sessions earlier in the morning. One is that we need to have at least 500 PhD fellowships, not 50, not 15, Anil. At least 500 PhD fellowships that should be given by an ADM every year, and the states must also provide for special PhD fellowships to get this problem of trained, rigorously trained, empirically oriented scholars who will bring all the knowledge together and help bringing future into present, as one of you said very nicely. For that, we need young scholars to be supported. And we are not doing much on that, number one. Number two, we somehow believe that disaster management means only looking at the negative deviations from the mean. But Dr. Swaminathan a long time ago said, good weather code. When rainfall is well distributed, what do we do in that year? In that year, we create fund, we create reserve, we create capacity in the community to save, so that when the disaster comes, they can cope with it. So we must really think of reviving the idea of good weather code. How will we use good rainfall? A lot of water is draining out in the years when rainfall is good, because we have not used the summer of the various years for desilting our ponds. In UP, all along the Ganga River, there were ponds in the villages which used to absorb extra water and release it during summer, so the whole river would become a very resilient ecosystem. Those ponds have been encroached upon. They have been silted up. वो तालाब की ज़मीन दिखाते हैं revenue records में, but actually it is owned by private people. So I think second issue would be that how do we create code and institutional mechanism for conditions, for good favorable climatic conditions, so that community does not forget that their role for collective action is only in the years when climate is bad. They must prepare themselves. Preventive measures must be started in the years when climate is good. That time they are more optimistic, they are more happy, and they are more joyful, and maybe they will work together better. Third point, we had designed DMIS, as you know, during 2001 earthquake in Gujarat. And then Panijbal, who was the Relief Commissioner, incorporated in the Gujarat government's disaster management system. We need to have DMIS in every state. Every state should have a DMIS. And one of the important components of that was that we wanted volunteers to be identified so that when there is a disaster, they will be available to provide immediate relief of various kinds
in the neighborhood. And they could mention it within 50 kilometers, 500 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers, in what range would they be willing to provide that support? I can tell you when there is a disaster, after 24 hours, all disasters become similar, because then there's a debris, and then you have to excavate the life, and so on and so forth. So I think we need to develop DMIS in every state, every district. This is another recommendation I would strongly give, and NIDM must steer it, that there must be a very systematic DMI, disaster management information system, which will go up from block and district to the national level and provide both capacity and willingness to use good weather opportunities, and also provide mechanism to deal with mitigating and coping with the disaster situation. Another very interesting point which came from Madhav's presentation was that the urban infrastructure. I recently wrote a note for RERA as to what are the regulations we need in urban property management for coping with climate change. You know, the number of glass buildings which create reflexes and increase the temperature not only for the city, for the whole environment. There must be some regulation of that. Number of buildings without rooftop water harvesting which are given building use permission. There should be no building given building use permission unless it harvests its rooftop water. Sir, ये आप करवा दीजिए municipal corporations में. सभी UP के अंदर UP can become the first state which will enforce this, that no new building will be allowed the building use permission till you harvest the rooftop water in your underground tanks, and therefore reduce the demand on the collective water and other such system, as many of you mentioned, water being so critical. Finally, I would say that the watershed as a basis for planning, which many of you have used, different term, basin level or landscape level or watershed level, basically there is no escape from it. There is absolutely no escape, but problem is that we only talk about landscape management or watershed management for rural areas. The fact is that a lot of water bodies in the urban areas have been filled up. It is well known, in 2001 it came out clearly that buildings which are built on filled up low-lying areas are the most fragile when earthquake comes. And now this is true for Joshimath. It's coming up that whichever buildings are built, the township are built on the filled up, whether with landslide or otherwise, are the most vulnerable ones. Now we need to bring this in a very cognitive framework of planners, and NIDM must really generate some guidelines, and maybe Prime Minister should be persuaded to issue one of his Mann Ki Baat only on this issue as to how different cities must change their regulatory process so that the entire burden of climate resilience doesn't come on the people in rural areas. The urban people who benefit more from the resources and opportunities must bear the greater responsibilities. And last, please remember, employment guarantee scheme in Maharashtra. Entire employment guarantee scheme in Maharashtra was paid for by a separate escrow account, a separate budget account, by the professional tax in Mumbai. One city, professionals in one city paid a mandatory tax by which the entire employment guarantee scheme was funded, because of which percolation tanks were created in rural Maharashtra, because of which migration was reduced effectively, apart from other resilient mechanisms. So I think we need to create similar mechanism of a professional tax in every city to manage in the hinterland of those cities the coping of the climatic risk that is taking place and preventive measures that can be taken up. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot, and big round of applause for all the panelists and our chair. And with their permission, I would like to close this and take this opportunity to thank NIDM for agreeing to have this session in the overall agenda, and also all my colleagues who actually helped or conceptualized and coordinated this event, including all the logistics which are around. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, sir. So just a minute, sir. And before, ladies and gentlemen, we close this session, we would like to play a small video message by Professor Rajiv Shaw, who's from Kyoto University, Japan, and Commissioner S&T Committee of UNDRR. Can we have the video message, please?
Namaskar. My name is Rajiv Shaw from Kyoto University, Japan. My sincere congratulations to NIDM and all of its partners for putting forward such a grand and important event of resilience building of India towards 100 years from its independence. Importance of disaster risk, climate change, biodiversity losses has been increasing in the global risk landscape, along with other new and emerging risks of digital divide, cybersecurity, etc. Vision 2047 is very important, especially to put forward a futuristic approach. While all of us are thinking of global frameworks until 2030, I think it is important to think beyond it. India will have better infrastructure, better end-to-end early warning system, and better community resilience. We will possibly face new risks in the world of uncertainty, but we will also be prepared with new and emerging technologies and a very strong youth innovation. India's leadership in G20 is definitely a turning point in the field of disaster risk reduction, not only for the country, but for the world. With the Prime Minister's 10-point agenda and LIAF Life as the overarching strategy, I'm confident that India will lead the DRR agenda globally to make risk reduction as a part of our daily lifestyle. I very much look forward to the outputs of the event and wishing the event a grand success. Thank you and namaskar.
Namaskar, sir, and thank you very much indeed for that wonderful message from you. And ladies and gentlemen, before we close the session, I would request Professor Anil Gupta of NIDM to kindly do the honors of presenting a token of gratitude to our distinguished chair, Shri Manoj Singh Ji, Additional Chief Secretary, Government of Uttar Pradesh. Thank you very much indeed, sir, for gracing this occasion and for all the valuable inputs we had from you. Requesting Professor Gupta to present to our co-chair, Professor Anil K. Gupta, his namesake, from Gyan and Honeybee Network, former Vice President, NIF. Thank you, Professor Gupta, for doing the honors. I would now request Mr. Dilip Singh from UNDP to kindly do the honors of presenting memento. Ms. Swati will do the honors. We present to our session moderator, Shri Kirtiman Avasthi, Senior Policy Advisor, Climate Change, GIZ, India. Thank you, sir, for that wonderful job of moderation you did in this session and for, most importantly, concluding it in time. We present, Ms. Swati, kindly stay back and present to Shri Ashish Tiwari, Secretary EFNCC, Government of Uttar Pradesh. To Dr. Ranjan Panda, Chair CCC Network. To Dr. Panda. Thank you, sir. To Dr. Ritesh Kumar, Director, WISA. To Dr. Madhav Pai, CEO, World Resources Institute, India. And also to Shri Manu Gupta, co-founder Seeds India and Seeds Asia Pacific. Thank you, Ms. Swati, for doing the honors. Thank you very much indeed. And may we have a request for a group photograph of the eminent panel, requesting Professor Gupta to kindly join. Ms. Swati, you also kindly join the panel.
May I also invite my colleagues who actually conceptualized and coordinated this whole event, Soumya, Manoj, Rohit, Manas. Soumik, if you are also here, thank you.
Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, we now close the proceedings of this session and also of day one of Resummit 2047. Tomorrow, the first session begins at 9:30 a.m. We would request you all to kindly be seated at least half an hour before that. The registration opens much before, around 8:30. and all those who have filled in their registration form are requested to kindly hand them over at the registration counter and collect the delegates back. If you haven't done so by today evening, you can do it tomorrow also. So ladies and gentlemen, we look forward to all of you joining us for yet another exciting and knowledgeable day of the summit tomorrow, the day 2, which begins at 9:30 a.m. Thank you once again for your participation. Have a wonderful evening ahead. Safe drive home. Good evening and namaskar.
Recording stop.
जिम्मेदारी का काम होता है